Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Amber and this is Fundy Free. Before we get started today, if you like what I'm doing and like my content, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get notified every time new content comes out. I am posting every week on Friday. Today we have a special guest, Sam Granger, and he is joining me this evening to tell his story and his experience in his faith. And I'm really excited to have you on, Sam. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So, tell me, Sam, how did you grow up, or what type of faith did you grow up in? Just kind of give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, so I guess you would call it Protestant. It was technically non-denominational, and it was a very casual, laid-back faith. In the sense that the Christian music that I grew up listening to, it was contemporary Christian music, and it, had all of the, modern amenities of, the same type of sound as like modern rock music.
Hmm.
And it was like, Michael W. Smith, Amy Grant, um, and as I grew up older, Chris Tomlin, Mercy Me, those sorts of artists.
Hmm.
And always went to church every Sunday, but I really really did not like Sunday school because I am on the autism spectrum, and it just would be too overstimulating for me. My mother, later, when I was middle or high school, she remedied that a bit. By this point, I wasn't going to Sunday school anymore, but she remedied that a bit by creating a program where um, neurodivergent kids and kids, with certain, challenges of that nature, could be paired up with a buddy during church while their parents could still go into church, and they'd be given like a buzzer, and it would ring if the parents needed it. So that was that was um a good good thing my mother
Yeah.
did, and she has experience obviously with that because me and my brother are both on the autism spectrum. And so I since I am on the autism spectrum, I one of my specialist subjects was Christian music. I'm kind of a walking arsenal of every contemporary Christian song, from like the late 90s, early 2000s, and a little bit onward too. Not really as much the old hymns, but
Hmm.
you know, so that was really like my most interaction with Christianity, and I believed in God, and like I prayed with my mother every night, but I it was a child's faith. It was very
Hmm.
unnuanced, and it was, I believed it because that's what my parents told me. And so as I became a teenager, there's and the pastors at my church will tell you, there's that transitional phase where the child's faith kind of like becomes your own personal faith, and there's doubts and questions.
Hmm.
um and during that time, my dad worked for a I don't want to say too much about them, just for their
No.
privacy.
Yeah. Totally
But
understand.
yeah, he worked for a youth group for a time, and then he became a pastor at the church we grew up attending, and that's what he does now. And And so, uh, yeah. Any follow-up questions to that? I don't know, like,
Yeah. No,
you
you're
know,
fine. So my middle daughter is actually on the spectrum. She's high functioning.
I
And
see.
so whenever it came to faith and church and religion, did you find that more black and white things were easier to believe and accept as reality, or was faith a hard concept for you to really kind of grasp a hold of as you got older? Or
That's a good
does
question. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, no, I mean, does my question make sense? Because I know that my daughter kind of questions more things in a very black and white. She sees the world in very black and white and very
Yeah,
exact. And so God is not visible. So it's more of, okay, how can you prove to me that this is what I should believe in versus I just automatically
yeah.
believe.
That is interesting. I feel like yes, I definitely have always, I've tried to kind of break away from that a little bit, but I have historically tended to be a black and white thinker. Um,
Mhm.
and recently, like I've been trying to just, um, understand like, the ambiguities of the world and just, try to, you know, see the world for as complex as it is. And it's, both uncomfortable and, also kind of liberating to, break some very toxic distortions of absolutism that I used to kind of fall into. Um, in terms of whether I feel like if I thought about it more, I haven't really
Mhm.
thought about that. So if I thought about it more, I want to say that yeah, I probably did have a black and white understanding of faith.
Mhm.
And um and I'm sorry, was that the entirety of your question? Did I kind of answer it?
Yeah, and I know I kinda threw that at you kinda left field because it literally just came to my head. It wasn't like a pre-prompted question.
Yeah,
Was it, as you got older, was it easier to kind of move from that childlike faith into still having a type of faith and believing in God? Was there proof to you that he existed, or was it more of "Oh, I don't understand why we are believing this because I don't see proof of this" type of thing?
sure. Um So yeah, it was when I was a junior in high school. That's really when I started having doubts, and it was very, very debilitating for me because um, I'd never had doubts before, and I'm just kind of realizing this now because I wasn't familiar with doubts. Those feelings, were very terrifying for me to sit with.
Mhm.
Um, and I was also starting to develop issues with OCD, so I'm not really sure that the doubts had like a logic behind them so much as they were, connected to that.
Mhm.
Um, and so, like, how I combated them was I read this book called "The Case for Christ" by Lee Strobel. Are you familiar with
Yes.
that book?
Yeah, I am. Yes.
Yeah, and I was reading it solely just for like to confirm my what was comfortable to me.
Yeah.
And I uh I just eventually that's maybe a question for later. Eventually I just came to
Yeah.
find too many holes, and because the case he makes is a lot of Christian apologetics make it. And he because that's very, C.S. Lewis was arguably an apologetic. I also read Mere Christianity, and that became one of my favorite books.
Mhm.
Um, and um, and so that was like the first kind of like questioning that I did. I don't really like remember how much of it was like based on like, does this really make sense to me? Um,
Mhm.
and then, but later that year, interestingly, I started becoming comfortable with the idea of breaking away, and I started calling myself agnostic. But again, I think I was just doing it, I think it was just kind of like a phase I was in because I liked calling myself agnostic. I tended to put people into specific boxes. I was very
Mhm.
obsessed with like this is another autistic specialist subject. I was very obsessed with the religious and political views of celebrities and public figures. And
Mhm.
there's this big list of on Wikipedia of atheists of that I've read so many times over the years. And there's another of, list of agnostics.
Mhm.
Um, and for somebody like me who gets interested in that kind of thing, that's like heaven. And yeah, no pun intended.
Right.
And and so yeah, I think that was kind of why I don't know if it was like genuine
Yeah.
uh questioning so much as I was just like exploring different identities, trying
Yeah.
to find out who I was.
Mhm.
And you don't when you're a teenager like that, you don't always have like, the right tools to do that. And then in when I started college, I found my way back to the faith and decided, I'm gonna really commit to it. And I for about 2.5 years, I was deeply immersed in the faith. Um, and this is more in college.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you like did you want me to
Yeah.
like get to the
Yeah.
point where like so yeah I became part of this group, um, this ecumenical college group. Ecumenical means multiple denominations for those watching, and so I was Protestant from this very but really more non-denominational from this really modern church. Like our had this big auditorium with these modern bands that are more akin to like recording artists. They got their guitars and their drummers and
And their
um
headsets or all that
right,
stuff. Yeah.
right. And I was enmeshed with a lot of more old school Catholics. And I'd say about at least half, if not more, of the group was Catholic. And then there was a smattering of other denominations. Like there was some Orthodox, and there was somebody from Assemblies of God, and that sort of thing. Um, and that group was also charismatic, meaning so they did the worship was much more low key. It was just somebody with the guitar, and then there was this one guy who he played the violin. And if you had like a quirky instrument that you would play, you could join in. And it was just in a university classroom, and them singing with these mic low key mics that they plugged in at the front of the room. But in between the songs, it was charismatic, so people would pray out loud and they would speak in tongues. And
That's an
this
experience.
oh yeah, and I wasn't used to that kind of work. So like the first time I attended, I was a little like, "Eh," I was a little freaked out.
Yeah.
Um, and but I became so immersed in this group. This group really just became my home and my community.
Mhm.
Um and I did, find some things of value there. First of all, the value of male friendship, which I'd really never had before. I've always, been kind of a loner. I didn't really, hang out with friends in high school. Because of being on the spectrum and being kind of introverted and, unable to, difficulty handling certain social situations. And college, I really tried to go out of my shell. I had a real desire to connect with people. And because I'm kind of I don't like sports. I'm not really like manly, for lack of a better term. I didn't fit in with a lot of guys, but the guys in this group did kind of show me they did show me kindness, and they showed me, um uh trust and intimacy. Um and I was part of men's groups, and I, would meet regularly with this male friend, and I always genuinely looked forward to it. Um and it just that was like some of the most comfort I found around a group of people in my life, because I'd go to this group of people. Everybody knew me. Everybody knew something about me, and they genuinely liked my presence there. And I that was valuable to me. But when I started going there second year of college,
Mhm.
and then about a year and a half in, I my I always was kind of politically minded and outspoken. I used to be more right wing, and then I started to transition more politically to the left, primarily because of what was happening with Ferguson. There was that whole unrest with the killing of Michael
Yes.
Brown, and then the lack of an indictment. And that, like, I reading perspectives um about that. I was, there's so many black people are saying, hey, I've had this experience and that experience with profiling and the cops. And I was like, oh, maybe this is actually a problem. And my church actually was you know put forth steps to be more intentional about that.
Mhm.
Was one, because that's not really an issue that gets caught up in like theological questions, like,
Exactly.
um
Yes.
so you're not generally gonna like be accused of like being unbiblical if you take a more um you know a stance on race that aligns more with what progressives think. And so that was really pivotal for me, in kind of shifting my political views. And I was, still pretty Christian, but I was also like, I was supporting Bernie Sanders. Um, and I did get a little bit of pushback on that. Um, Not really so much in the Christian group, but I
Mhm.
also was. Did you have more questions? I feel like I've been rambling on and
No.
on and on.
No. No, this is, like, amazing. I'm, like, so fascinated. So,
Okay,
'cause
continue.
I'm, like, quietly agreeing with you so much. So this is fantastic. So keep going.
Yeah. So I also should say, for context, simultaneously while I was part of this Christian group, I was also part of MSU Students for Life, an anti-abortion group. But that, I think I'll save a little bit for later to talk in more detail, because
Mhm.
that honestly deserves its own conversation. Um, but I, thinking about racism and the way it worked, and trying to listen to people's experiences, inevitably led me to the question. The question, I shouldn't say the question, that's a bad choice of words. um, the church's position, specifically on the LGBT community. And that was
Mhm.
something I always kind of struggled with, because another autistic special, I'm not part of the LGBT community, but another autistic specialist subject for me was, for some reason, I got really interested in gay icons and gay
Mhm.
anthems. And there were Wikipedia pages for those that I would peruse from time to time.
Mhm.
And the thing about uh the reason that these prominent figures, like, prominent gay icons, are like, Cher, Madonna, um Lady Gaga in the modern age. um
Mhm.
it's uh you kind of, I guess, earn, for lack of a better term, your status there if you're really if you're really like flamboyant, if you have, or if you sing about or have a story of struggle. Those are, because the people in the LGBT community historically have related to that. And
Right.
I found just this really beautiful culture, and it just, I was kind of like sad as it dawned on me I can't really support this culture even though I think it's so beautiful. And then and so unfortunately, as I started finding my way back to the faith, I put out this very homophobic Facebook post wherein I said, if same this was before gay marriage was legal. I said if gay marriage was legalized, it could lead to legalizing pedophilia.
Hmm.
So yeah, that wasn't great. Um, but the question still started weighing on me as I'm urging more understanding and listening to this, people of color, this group of people that's so integral to um, combating the discrimination and the injustices that they face. And I have this pretty significant gap with the LGBT community because, my church, um, they believe marriage is one man, one woman,
Hmm.
and most, if not all, sexual gratification outside of that is sinful. And even though they're polite, they're not gonna, use homophobic slurs. They're not gonna, harass people in that kind of tangible way. It doesn't mean that, the fact that they're nice doesn't mean they might not be covertly causing harm to this community, or at the very least not
Right.
really helping them by, because by complicating what is, to some degree kind of a simple question.
Right.
um and then trans people were starting to get more visibility. Caitlyn Jenner came out, and
Hmm.
that just made it more difficult because they're still finding visibility, and so the pain for them still much more real. um and you know and that was kind of the be yeah, that was kind of the beginning for me. And yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'll take a break here.
No, but that's really fascinating because I had a very strong right wing stance for most of my life. Very, I mean, but it was the way I was raised. I was raised very
Yeah,
homophobic, being from the South, even if I wasn't outwardly racist, I had a lot of racism very ingrained into my upbringing. A
yeah.
lot of people around me were very racist. My dad was an extreme racist and very homophobic. I mean, he would be downright rude to people in restaurants. He would
Oh,
request
geez.
different waiters. I mean, it was just really bad.
Wow.
And as I started deconstructing, I realized how these marginalized groups were their voices were not being properly heard,
Yeah,
and that they and their stories, and they mattered to God. They mattered to, you know, they should matter to me, for lack of, a better way of saying it.
yeah,
And I started listening to these stories. I started watching and researching stories in the Black community, and I will never claim that I understand because I have the privilege of being white. I don't understand,
right.
and I acknowledge that, but I try. Really started researching, and I really started researching things in the LGBTQ community and realizing how much of a detrimental impact Christianity has had on these groups
Yeah,
because of how we have handled things, how we've approached things, how we have swept things under the rug, or we've just downright been rude and evil and disgusting towards these groups. And that was like the switch in my head that went, oh, this is not right. I am no longer over here. I started moving my spectrum way over here with how I believed and how I accepted and loved these people and tried to understand from their point of view what they deal with on a daily basis that I will never understand or comprehend because I don't have to worry about it. And so I really Ferguson was one of the big ones, just like you said, that
Yeah.
really hit, like really clicked. And I remember that and the lack of indictment. And then I was like, this is not okay. And then the riots that happened in Ferguson, and everyone around me was very angry about the riots, saying, why are people doing this? They want
Yeah.
justice, but they're destroying everything. And one of my friends said, if you have been trampled on your whole life and your voice has been silenced and you've been targeted your whole life, you're not gonna have any other option than to be
Right.
loud and to riot and to do these things to get the attention that you need to get justice.
It's what Martin Luther King says, a riot is language of the unheard. It's not enough for me to condemn riots because a riot is the language of the unheard.
Yes, exactly. That just gave me goosebumps because that you quoted
Yeah.
that. That was exactly true. And that changed my whole perspective. And from
Yeah.
that point is whenever I really started working on trying to, educate myself, try to and it shifted my Christianity and my faith from being so dogmatic because I was already deconstructing and realizing all the stuff that had been plugged into my head was really white nationalism, a lot of, racism, a lot of this
Yeah.
stuff just ingrained in me. And I had to start getting rid of all of that to change that. And I also have different views now on pro choice and pro life because of the same thing, which I know that you
Yeah.
said that you were going to talk about that too. And I can ramble on about that too, because it's just fascinating that you're talking about this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel that, I understand, because
Yeah.
I kind of had the same kind of things that triggered my change in my thinking. So
Yeah. Um, yeah. Did you have a further question for me or?
yeah, yeah. So once you started shifting, did it start really changing your perspective on other hot issues with evangelicals, like with abortion or with different things like that? Did it change like your whole mindset of how you approach things too, or did it um reaffirm things of how you believed, or did you have like a whole radical change in how you kind of looked at things?
I had a radical but also very gradual change.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize, people who, gave me shit for some of this stuff, that most of my views, I didn't change them overnight. It was a process.
Mhm.
It took months, oftentimes.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of, how much it shifted my thinking. I guess again, the it shift the how I was approaching the race issue, and the the need to center the marginalized shifted my thinking, and
Mhm.
that's what led me to question, the my point of view on the LGBT issue. um
Mhm.
and also just yeah. I'm losing my train of thought
No,
here.
no, you're totally
Yeah.
fine. Because I kind of veered into totally different questions than what I sent you, so I
Yeah.
apologize.
It's okay.
Um, so where you are now, so kind of fast forward to more present day, do you still consider yourself a person of faith? Did you move more back into agnosticism? Kind of where are you at now with everything?
I would consider myself a secular humanist and agnostic, but tend to lean toward atheist. I don't believe in God. I um, I don't believe in an afterlife or any, anything like that. I I think everybody is a little agnostic. I don't think, that question is something we can truly know. Um, and one mistake that I did make when I deconstructed and finally said, okay, I can't, I'm not part of this faith anymore. I kind of acted as though now my journey was done.
Mm-hmm.
And so recently I've, been trying to just remember why I left the faith and trying to find the freedom that I was seeking when I abandoned the faith.
Mm-hmm.
Trying, and um and so I, for a while I was a somewhat hardline atheist. Um and there's some days that I still think, yeah, I'm kind of an atheist. Um and I'm trying to process what I'm going to say as I'm trying to put the
No,
words to it.
you're
Um
good.
and so um I
Would it help if we kind of look at, what changed, what kind of caused the change from your faith and then deciding to leave? Would that
Yeah,
be a better place to start? Because I mean,
that would be
that's
helpful.
yeah, let's do that. Because that's really I'm really curious about that too. What was the kind of like the turning point for you?
Um, it was the LGBT issue. In about December of 2015, I I started to really think about, um, maybe this isn't really for me, and I'm having a lot of misgivings about this particular issue. I wanna support this community,
Mhm.
and so I decided I'm gonna, try to see if I can break away, and it turned out to be a lot more difficult and agonizing than I thought. Um, because all of, my closest friends were in this Christian group, and they'd been so good to me and so kind to me. And um but I also reasoned, hey, you don't need to, give up your faith. People of faith can support the LGBT community. So I started exploring. I went to a Unitarian Universalist church, and I did a
Mhm.
little bit of exploring, there, but not really much, because it just started leading to broader questions about, does God really exist?
Mhm.
And my thinking on that, I don't remember my thought process at the time, but my thinking on that now, and this is just me, I know you said you still believe in God. My thinking on that now is, um the reasons people give for why there has to be a God are, well, the world is so ordered. The ontological argument, I believe it's called, is,
Mhm.
uh how can the world be so ordered, and come this way by random chance? Which is, it's a compelling philosophical and scientific question, and I think at most it makes the case, hey, there might be some divine creator out there, or there might be, some higher explanation for all of this. But um, I don't think it makes a sufficient case for there being a God, necessarily, like in the way that I was taught about God,
Mhm.
because the argument is, well, something so ordered can't come from nothing. well, then who created God? Because God is, is all perfect and all powerful and all loving, and he's always been just there and always been perfect. How does
Mm-hmm.
that make more sense than our ordered but very imperfect in a lot of ways world, coming from uh, you know, coming out of nothing, as they say. I am a little skeptical of that. I think it's more complicated than, oh, we just came from random chance.
Right.
But that's kind of my feeling about that now. So at the time, I was an undergrad in college. This was at the height of the 2016 primaries, and so I was, still campaigning for Bernie,
Mm-hmm.
and I was, telling all of my friends in the group about, my doubts and my misgivings, and I I got into a period where I was just perpetually depressed all the time, because I was coming to grips with the possibility, the implications of what if there is no God, and simultaneously, what if I'm going to hell? Those were
Mm-hmm.
two, dreadful thoughts that I was experiencing constantly, and I
That's
was,
terrifying.
yeah, yeah, it's heavy shit.
It really is.
And um and I was just, in a perpetual state of existential dread.
Oh, yeah.
And um and because you realize just how little you have control of in the world. And
Yes.
we have control of a lot in the world, but there's also so much that we have no control over. And you know anything could come out. There's so many things that could just come out of the blue for no, we discovered this real, especially in the past couple of years with a
Mm-hmm.
fucking global pandemic.
Right.
um you know that could just, come out of the blue and fuck everything up for us, and all of our hard work and all of our, all of the control that we have. And so at the same time, I was seeing a therapist. I was starting to get treated for depression, with medication, and that helped clear my thinking a little bit. And eventually, I came to terms with the fact, that this is, um, my faith is, it's causing me so much angst. I need to just step away. I need to put this down.
Yeah.
And once I did, I felt some of the greatest liberation I have ever felt, Um, and I just, felt that, I felt I could be more honest with people. I dreaded having to
Mm-hmm.
tell my friends in the group, but um, after I had made the choice, like, you know, I knew that they wouldn't, they would be disappointed. I anticipated that, and I respected that.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was happy to tell them, because I was happy to just like be honest with them, versus before, where I'm part of this group. I'm um I'm saying that I am this thing that I'm not sure that I am.
Mm-hmm.
Um so yeah,
You
yeah,
probably felt like you could finally be completely honest, because I know for me recently I had to go through a period of, we were in the process of leaving a church, but they didn't know we were leaving because it was like a whole issue. The pastor's very racist.
yeah,
But I wanted to fulfill my commitment to something I committed to, and I was like, I need to see this out. So for the last 4 months, I've just been going and just to fulfill my commitment, and I felt so much like I was lying to them, like I was
yeah,
just being inauthentic, that I was misleading them, and my therapist is like, well, you're allowed to be simultaneously both. You can feel bad for leaving, but you can also feel okay with the fact that you're coming to yourself, like you're
Sh-
coming into your truth.
right.
And so finally, now that we were able to say, okay, now we're done, we're walking away, there's that relief there because now I don't
Yeah.
have to hide anymore behind what I felt like I needed to hide behind. Does that make sense? Is that kind of like where you felt like you were?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
How did did you were you able to keep some of the friendships from the church, or did you lose the friendships once you
No,
made
I
the
kept
decision?
no, I kept a good many of the friendships.
That's great.
Nobody um nobody did, specifically stopped being my friend because I had fallen away from the faith. Now, because I wasn't as active in the group as before, you know, inevitably you just drift apart from people. And,
Mhm.
that happens regardless of, your ideology. You just drift apart from people and uh it gets to a point, hey, you see someone in public, you say a friendly hi to them, but that's the extent of it. That's just how,
Mhm.
that's the only way that I lost connection with those people. It wasn't really um nobody um ever said, I don't want to be your friend anymore because you're not part of this faith. And
Yeah.
I appreciated that. I still have a couple very close friends who I talk to regularly from that group.
Mhm.
So yeah.
That's awesome though. I mean, because not a lot of people get that experience. A lot of people, whenever they leave, they end up losing their entire community. So I'm really happy that you didn't have to deal with that, and they were very accepting for you.
Yeah.
And because that's a positive thing. It's almost like it's very affirming for you and like very supportive of you. So those are really good friends. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so um now, as did you say a progressive humanist? Is that what you said? I remember
Secular
humanist.
humanist.
Secular humanist. I was like, humanist. I can't talk tonight. Progressive was something to different in my brain.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've really I know that we're always continuously evolving and growing and trying to better ourselves just as human beings, if we're on this path. Do you feel like you've really kind of come into your own in how you believe now from since you've left, like, the faith? Do you really just feel like you've really become more well-rounded as a person now that you're able to explore all of this?
Yes. But it has not been without struggle and without going down, I guess you would say, for lack of a better term, the wrong path. Um, because getting back a little bit to that sort of black and white thinking. Hello, hello, can you hear me? I can't hear you at all.
Sorry. Someone tried to call me and it came across on my phone. I'm so sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay. Um, and so, um, I, I was pretty outspoken, as progressive as they came. I'm a Bernie supporting college student.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and but I also had a penchant for getting immersed in some problematic parts of social justice culture. Um,
So, you said you started getting into some social justice things that are a little more toxic or a little, not so good? Is that what you were talking about?
yeah, they tend to be very absolutist in their way of thinking. It's a lot
Mhm.
of uh this word or saying is actually problematic for this reason. And sometimes they have a point, but other times you know it it's kind of dubious whether the word or phrase in question is actually harmful. um like, for example, there's some people who say, well, you shouldn't say spooky because it's derived from the word spook, which has racist origins, which is true. It does have
It,
racist origins, but
right.
is saying that now really carrying on that racist legacy? Now, the one caveat to that is that black girls have talked about being called spooks in school, so it's not
Hmm.
completely gone. But like most people, you know, say spooky, and it's they just mean, oh, it's kind of scary, it's
Scary.
Halloween. And
Hmm.
so because that's how language works, it evolves. And
Hmm.
so it's possible for a word to devolve or evolve from its original meaning.
Right.
So that there's that kind of absolutism, and then there's also the call outs, and there's also um just people being really nasty to each other online, um and dogpiling on people who they believe have gaslit them or said something really uh problematic. And again, sometimes they have a point, and sometimes it's an interpersonal issue that's overinflated, or sometimes they just it's a matter of disagreement, and they just don't have a point at all.
Right.
um but it's backed by a very extreme iteration of um we need to listen to the marginalized, and it's taken to the extreme of we need to be basically the yes men of some of the marginalized. Like, somebody says um this is offensive, this is hurtful to this group of people, we don't question it, we just say okay, and and go along with it. And I just think that you know I believe in centering the marginalized, and that was a reason, a real reason, why I left my faith. But
Hmm.
I think the process of centering the marginalized is more complicated than that. It does involve a lot of listening, and sometimes you hear this experience is this I should say this word or this saying you said is really racist, and the you need to have some capacity to understand, hey, they have a perspective that I don't, they probably know
Yes.
more. And so you
Yes.
do need to have some capacity for that. But they it say always listen to this group of people can homogenize that group of people because there's disagreement among them, and there's some things where there's not universal agreement. It also
Hmm.
doesn't really offer a good solution to, say, Kanye West saying 400 years of slavery, that sounds like a choice to me. Saying something so brazenly racist like that, it's kind of,
Yes.
because it doesn't offer tools for that.
Right.
And so um this culture made me more antagonistic as well. I would regularly get into fights with people online. um and I have regrets. I there's some times that I look back on it, I'm like, oh my God, I made an asshole of myself.
Right.
And
Haven't we
um
all, though?
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
that's fair. But and there, unfortunately, one of the worst places for that was this one particular um ex-evangelical group that was very um centered on social justice principles, which isn't inherently a bad thing. I believe in social justice, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of a lot of foundational principles that you could find even among these communities that I agree with. Um, but this group of people I was part of on Facebook just was incredibly toxic because um, it's a group filled with traumatized people who don't necessarily have the tools to navigate their trauma and don't necessarily know how to deal when they encounter you know some a perspective that
Is
challenges how they
different.
think about challenges how they think about themselves.
Mhm.
The absolutist nature of of some of these uh factions of the internet, um it doesn't allow for much room to consider competing access needs.
Mhm.
um and in this group there would just be the most vicious fights online. I mean, they would sometimes go on for 2 days, just people just would go on and on and on, and comments would accumulate into the hundreds of just people going back and forth against each other.
Oh
And
my goodness.
the moderators, I think were just so in over their heads because on the one hand I kind of sympathize with them. Like they had to figure out how to moderate a group of thousands of people, a growing group which um who sometimes could be very uh, inconsiderate of the work that they had to do to keep this going. On
Mhm.
the other hand, some some of the ways they handled it were very problematic, like just threatening to boot people without warning if they said anything remote that uh, if they said anything that was like white bro atheism. And that's a very broad term. And
Mhm.
people might have differing opinions on that term, and people might not know what that means.
Right.
And, it does describe a real problem, which is some of these secular spaces, are have a lot of racism and transphobia and misogyny, and they're very white male, and they don't really um, there should be safe havens for those groups of people because they've been the most harmed by religion, but they're often just extensions um,
Yes.
of the same power systems. But you know people aren't always going to know that, and they're not always going to know what counts as white. I still like question, there's some gray areas. Does that sound kind of like white bro atheism, and
Right.
so it was just that kind of thing. And yeah, I that a group like that just can't possibly be healing, because the mods are hesitant to intervene sometimes when things get out of hand
Yes.
because they don't want to tone police. And that
Exactly.
and that's where, like, there needs to be some more clarity. Tone policing is a genuine problem, and I know because I am on
Yes.
the autism spectrum. And it's a genuine problem when somebody is voicing righteous anger at their experience, being oppressed, and somebody goes, well, maybe people would listen to you if you wouldn't sound so angry,
Yeah.
that. And but at the same time, like, there is a point where you need to draw the line. You don't have to let people just insult you. You don't have to uh just sit like a deer in the headlights and take all of these vitriolic comments piling on you. You definitely
Right.
don't have to let people, like, drag you on the internet and dox you and publicize this. That never happened to me, but it's happened to some people.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a complicated conversation, and I think the current discourse is not really equipped to have that conversation properly.
Yes.
Because it does pivot too in the opposite direction, where a lot of people um, dismiss, any attempt to discuss a marginalized group's lived experiences as well. They're just offended by everything. It's cancel culture like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's also a tool to derail conversations.
Yes.
And so I don't think I don't think Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson or any of those guys, I don't think they're interested in a conversation. I think they like um the uh
The
the
sound of their own
influence,
voice.
the sound of their own voice. Yeah, they like the influence, they like the power, and they're
Yes.
capitalizing off of it.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah. So yeah, that, and I do like our Facebook group because that kind of conflict is kind of minimal there. Sometimes there's like a spat here and there,
Mm-hmm.
and that's inevitable. And I don't think, conflict is inevitable, and sometimes the only way out is through. And
Yes.
sometimes the only way out is to try to deal with it maturely.
Yes.
But and I came close to getting into conflict with somebody, and after a couple of comments, I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to argue about this with you. But it's not like a constant thing on that, like the way it was in that other group. And so and our group, has more stringent rules about that, and I think groups shouldn't be afraid to do that. I think you can do that and still leave room for people to express anger about their experiences.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, I think the danger comes in is when people sell out 100% to something.
yeah,
I Because then they do not leave room for change or growth. And
right,
that is in any group. That's in social justice, that is in religion, that is in, philosophy. It doesn't really matter. Whatever plug you want to put in there, if you are 100% sold out and you're not willing to change, there is danger in that. And that
yeah,
is where you can become so radical, you then feel the need to attack other people who don't 100% agree with your worldview.
right,
And there's just, and I think that, like with the group that we're both in, we have so many people in there that are not, they're all searching and they're not all 100% sold out to one idea or another because they came from a world that was that way, that they
right,
want to, they're venting and they're finding a different reaction versus, being attacked for disagreeing on
sure,
some apologetic or some worldview that differs. So,
yeah, yeah. But that
and
is something that these groups need to be mindful of, and something that I think this particular group I was part of was not willing to be introspective about in a way um, that contradicted certain ideals of social justice, in a way that
mhm,
or critiqued social justice movements, um, which is evangelical mindsets following you um, after you leave the faith, because that sort of vitriol, as faulty as my church was, you would never find that in my
mhm,
church, in or my dad's church, I should say. um like, friendships ended over very, you know there was a mindset, if there was so much of, if you disagree with me on this, just unfriend me. And sometimes it was like a legitimate gripe, and
mhm,
sometimes it was something like, yeah, you know what, I don't really want, like, um I did once post, this is the only time I ever posted this, I made a point generally of not unfriending people over politics, but I did once post, if you call refugees rape fugees, like Tommy Lauren did, then yeah, I don't
Mm-hmm.
really want to be your friend anymore. And
No.
honestly, like I don't really regret posting that. Like I think
No.
that there's legitimate reasons, to drop people as friends, and friendships end, and it's complicated. Um, but in these circles, you can lose friends over, you know, much less significant disagreements or issues,
Yes.
and that can feed a pressure to conform.
Yes.
In the evangelical circles I was part of, that would almost never happen. People would never stop being your friend because of simple, um, differences in worldview. That
That's
that
that's just fascinating to me that
yeah.
you had that such a positive experience with that. That's awesome.
That was one of my more positive experiences. There was a lot that was problematic about that sphere. They're kind people, but when you scratch beneath the surface, there's still just things about that, what they believe that I just can't accept.
Yeah.
So, you know, um, but yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So, well, we are a little over an hour now, and we can wrap this up. And I really appreciate you taking the time and talking to me. I've just been just very enthralled with your story. It's been very fascinating, and
Yeah, I was
I
happy
really
so much.
appreciate it. Yeah, I really appreciate it so much. And what is the name of the Facebook group that we're a part of? Is it the Deconstructing
Deconst
Fundamentalists?
Deconstruction discussion group, I think, is
That's
something of
right.
that nature.
Yes. So I will link that in my description box below if you guys are interested in, getting a part of this group. This group is really, really good. I've actually learned a lot of things. I've seen a lot of different perspectives in this group.
Yeah.
And I've really appreciated being a part of. I think I've been in it for about 6 or 8 months now, and it's been really good. And so I'm going to wrap it up here. Sam, thank you so much for coming on and spending, an hour of your evening with me
Yeah, I was
and
happy
talking to
to
me. Yeah.
talk to you.
Yeah. And if you all have your own story that you want to share, follow the instructions in the description box below. I would love to have you on. We can set up a time for an interview. Until next time, don't forget to subscribe and like the video and hit the notification bell. And again, until next time, we will talk to you soon. Everyone has a story, and what is yours? Thank you.